Let me be brutally honest with you for a moment. The financial world is on the verge of a tectonic shift so massive that most people will only recognize it in their rearview mirror, wondering how they missed the signs that were blinking in bright red all around them. We are not talking about a simple stock market correction or a shift in interest rates. We are talking about the fundamental reordering of global currency hierarchies. And at the heart of this silent revolution are two names you need to burn into your memory right now: the Iraqi Dinar and the Vietnamese Dong. What you are about to discover is not a baseless rumor from a shady online forum, but a carefully orchestrated, multi-year geopolitical and economic maneuver that is now entering its final critical phase, with a convergence of events pointing towards a potential revaluation window as early as 2025. Think about the current global financial landscape for a moment. The US dollar's dominance is being questioned like never before. Nations are actively seeking de-dollarization pathways, and emerging economies with robust growth trajectories are positioning themselves to claim a new seat at the table. This is the precise context in which the Central Bank of Iraq and the State Bank of Vietnam are operating, and their recent policy alignments are not random acts of desperation, but calculated steps on a grand chessboard. Let's start with Iraq, a nation that has been synonymous with war and instability for decades. But what if I told you that beneath that narrative lies a staggering reservoir of economic potential, currently locked away by an artificially low currency value? The CBI has been working relentlessly under the radar of mainstream financial media to meet the stringent conditions for a revaluation. They have successfully moved away from the Swiss dinar, unified their exchange rates, a key IMF requirement, and have been aggressively building their foreign currency reserves, which are now at record levels, providing a solid bedrock of confidence. Furthermore, they have been implementing monetary reforms to modernize their banking sector, reduce money laundering, and increase financial transparency, all to shake off the high-risk label that has plagued them for years. The most telling sign, however, comes from the corridors of international power. Global banks, particularly institutions with deep ties to the Gulf region and European financial centers, have been quietly increasing their holdings of IQD. This isn't a speculative gamble by retail investors anymore. This is smart money, institutional capital, positioning itself for a sovereign-level financial event. These banks are conducting deep due diligence, and their gradual accumulation signals a profound belief that the political and economic stars are finally aligning for Iraq. The country is no longer just an oil story. It's a story of economic rehabilitation, and a currency revaluation is the ultimate tool to slay the dragon of inflation, attract serious foreign direct investment beyond the oil sector, and allow the nation to rebuild its infrastructure without the crippling burden of a devalued currency. Imagine the implications. An Iraqi citizen suddenly having significant purchasing power, a government able to fund projects without printing more money, and international contractors flocking in, not just for oil, but for construction, technology, and consumer goods. This is the future the CBI is engineering, and 2025 represents a realistic target, a point where all these protracted reforms are expected to reach a critical mass, creating the stability necessary for the world to accept a new, stronger value for the dinar. But this is only one half of the story, and to truly understand the scale of what's coming, you cannot look at the IQD in isolation. Now shift your gaze eastward to Vietnam, because while Iraq's story is one of post-conflict recovery, Vietnam's narrative is a turbocharged economic miracle in the making, and its currency, the Dong, is the engine that is about to get a serious upgrade, making it the other cornerstone of this global financial realignment. For decades, Vietnam has been the next China, but that label is now obsolete. Vietnam is rapidly becoming Vietnam, a manufacturing and technological powerhouse in its own right, with a growth rate that consistently outstrips its regional peers and has the world's most powerful economies taking notice. The State Bank of Vietnam is not merely observing this trend. It is architecting it with a level of precision and foresight that is frankly breathtaking, and their moves are even more transparent and data-driven than what we see in Iraq. The key to understanding the VND's revaluation potential lies in a fundamental economic truth. A nation cannot run massive trade, surpluses with economic giants like the United States and China for. years on end, while simultaneously attracting a flood of foreign direct investment into its high-tech sector without its currency facing immense upward pressure. The SBV has been actively managing this pressure, carefully controlling the Dong's ban to maintain export competitiveness, but this is a temporary dam holding back an inevitable tide. Look at the hard data. Vietnam's foreign exchange reserves have skyrocketed, quadrupling over the last decade to well over $100 billion. A war chest that provides undeniable stability and signals to the world that they are ready to defend a new, stronger currency value. Furthermore, global financial institutions are not just dipping their toes in the water. They are diving in head first. Major banks from Singapore, South Korea, and Japan are establishing vast custodial services for the VND, a clear operational preparation for increased international trading and settlement in the currency. This isn't a speculative play. It's infrastructure being built for a new reality. The SBV's policies are perfectly aligned with this, focusing on controlling inflation, which they have kept remarkably low and stable, modernizing their payment systems, and, most crucially, promoting the internationalization of the Dong. They have signed bilateral currency swap agreements with countries like Japan and China, allowing for trade to be settled directly in Dong and Yen, or renminbi, bypassing the US dollar entirely. This is a monumental step towards de-dollarization and a direct precursor to a revaluation, as it builds global familiarity and trust in the Vietnamese currency. Think about the supply chain shifts happening globally. Companies are desperate for a China plus one strategy, and Vietnam is the primary beneficiary, becoming the factory floor for everything from Samsung smartphones to Apple headphones. This influx of advanced manufacturing doesn't just bring jobs, it brings sophisticated financial operations, a demand for stable and robust local currency for payroll and local expenses, and an embedded expectation of a strong and reliable monetary policy. The Vietnamese government knows that to transition from a low-cost labor hub to a high-value innovation economy, it needs a strong currency to reduce the cost of importing raw materials and advanced machinery, to curb overseas spending by its newly affluent citizens, and to give its companies the purchasing power to acquire foreign technology and competitors. A revaluation of the Dong is not a speculative fantasy. It is a strategic economic necessity for Vietnam's next phase of growth. The 2025 timeline is significant here as well, as it aligns with key milestones in Vietnam's socio-economic development plans and a potential upgrade of its stock market from frontier to emerging status, a move that would unlock billions in passive investment and demand a currency that reflects the true strength of its economy. So, while the IQD story is about emerging from the ashes, the VND story is about claiming a throne, and the silent countdown is the sound of global finance preparing for this dual event that will reshape investment portfolios and global trade routes forever. But to truly grasp the full picture, you need to understand how these two seemingly separate events are interconnected in the grand scheme of global power dynamics. So, we have these two powerful parallel narratives unfolding, one of reclamation, one of ascension. But to see them as separate is to miss the entire point. They are deeply intertwined threads in the same grand tapestry of a global financial system actively decoupling from its decades-long dependence on the US dollar. And this is where the silent preparation by global banks transforms from a curious trend into an undeniable strategic imperative. The BRICS alliance, along with other non-aligned nations, is aggressively promoting trade in local currencies, a movement that creates the perfect geopolitical and economic ecosystem for currencies like the IQD and VND to finally step into the spotlight and be revalued to their fair market value. Think of the international banking system not as a monolithic entity, but as a network of competitive giants. When a bank like HSBC, Standard Chartered, or Japan's MUFG begins to build liquidity and custodial frameworks for the dinar and the dong, it isn't out of charity. It's because their most valuable corporate and sovereign clients are demanding it. Multinational corporations setting up massive factories in Vietnam need to hedge their dong exposure. Energy giants negotiating oil contracts with Iraq are seeking to minimize dollar volatility by pricing more in IQD. This is the real, on-the-ground demand that is forcing the hands of these financial institutions. They are essentially building the plumbing and the electrical grid for a new financial city before the population boom hits, and the data shows the construction is well underway. The Central Bank of Iraq's removal of the currency auction's discretionary dollar sales and its push towards a true market-driven exchange rate is a direct response to this international pressure and a final, critical step towards WTO accession, which itself would be a monumental catalyst for revaluation. Similarly, the State Bank of Vietnam's relentless focus on modernizing its digital payment infrastructure and cracking down on goldization, where citizens hoard gold instead of trusting the local currency, is a deliberate campaign to strengthen domestic confidence in the Dong, which is just as important as international confidence. For you, the investor watching this from the sidelines, this translates into a window of opportunity that is fundamentally different from any speculative bubble like meme stocks or cryptocurrencies. This is a sovereign-level monetary policy event grounded in tangible economic progress, geopolitical realignment, and the cold, hard calculus of global trade. The potential for life-altering returns exists precisely because these currencies are currently valued at their post-war, developing economy levels, not at the levels befitting the economic powerhouses they are rapidly becoming. Imagine having the foresight to acquire an asset at its absolute basement price. Backed not by hype, but by trillion-dollar trade surpluses, vast natural resources, and the full might of national governments and international banks working in concert to ensure its success. The silent countdown is the sound of the final pieces clicking into place, the final IMF reports being filed, the last banking regulations being harmonized, the ultimate trade agreements being inked. When this countdown reaches zero, the announcement will not be a whisper in a niche forum. It will be a headline on every major financial news network across the globe, and by then, the early movers, the people who did their due diligence and understood the profound forces at play, will have already positioned themselves for a generational wealth transfer. This is your call to action, your moment to decide whether you will be a spectator of history or an active participant in it. The information is no longer secret. It's public, it's data-driven, and it's pointing towards a 2025 horizon. Your next step is absolutely critical. Do not let this moment pass you by. Click the subscribe button and hit the notification bell right now, because in the coming days, I will be releasing a definitive, step-by-step guide that breaks down the exact mechanisms, the specific banks that are most active, and the precise, safe strategies for positioning yourself ahead of this event. This is not financial advice. It is a wake-up call. The world is changing. The question is, will you change with it? Subscribe now because what comes next will change everything.